Good day, everybody. Welcome to the morning meeting. As we come on the air, there's breaking news around the world, including in Ukraine and Russia. We'll tell you about that in just a moment. We're also going to run through the day book, tell you about what we've got on tap for you in this episode and tonight. And the vice president's going to Hawaii. I'm excited to tell you about that. First, though, let's go the quad split, folks, and check in. Ukraine, for the first time, has used U.S.-made weapons, missiles, longer-range missiles, not long-range, to attack, to fire into Russia. And I just want to see if this is getting as big a play as we suspect it is. Let's see. No, it's not leading on CNN. Fox News is laughing with peers. Okay, here we come on 9 o'clock. There we go. Let's go to Fox, please. All right. They're leading with ballots counting in Pennsylvania. All right. Take it all down. I had thought we might be covering World War III on today's episode, but apparently it's not as big as the counting of ballots in Pennsylvania, which is the big story. But so we'll come back to that. Good morning. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Peace, love, and understanding, always, even in the midst of international conflict. The presumption of grace, even as Matt Gaetz's nomination hangs in the balance. And if you're going to participate in the chat, please don't make it a trash can or a sewer, which I know you do every day, but I keep asking because I'm naive. And if you're here on the two-way platform, thank you for joining. We're glad to have you here. If you want to be in the conversation, please raise your hand. If you've never raised your hand before, today is your lucky day. Like to call on new people, so please raise your hand. Call on some old people too, returning people. Sean and Dan, I will see you both in person tonight.
Get
Little known
excited.
fact. Little known fact. I don't think you two have ever met, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Not in person.
I am the only one who's met all three of us, so I am the glue that binds. But it's super exciting event tonight at downtown in Greenwich Village. Sean, Dan, and I will be live at 4 o'clock for the VIP reception. And when I say VIP, it really should be VVVIP. Very, very, very important people for our 4 o'clock meet and greet. There'll be some nice hors d'oeuvres, some beverages, and then at 5 o'clock, after the VIPs are seated in their front row seats, the doors open and we'll be live from 5 to 6. That replaces two-way tonight. So 5 p.m. If you're not in New York City, you're not coming to the event, tune in at 5 to see the program live, streamed from the Village Underground, part of the Comedy Cellar Empire. We're very grateful to them for hosting us. We'll see everybody there. All right. And you can't join by Zoom tonight. Let me make that clear. Thank you for reminding me. Whoever just reminded me. It's only on YouTube tonight. There's no Zoom to join on the two-way platform. You can just watch it stream. The questions will come and the conversation will be driven by those who are present in person. Some tickets still remain, so if you want to come tonight, you still can, but we do recommend you buy them in advance and don't show up and be turned away, as often happens at the Village Underground, which sells out every show. All right, today, President Biden is in Brazil with a few final meetings of his international summit, and then he flies home. The vice president, switcheroony, not her usual private meetings, at 12:45 p.m., she flies to LA. And then at 4:25, she and Doug Emhoff fly to Hawaii. Not sure how long they'll be there, but they're going to be landing in Hawaii at 7:50 Hawaii time, which is like 6 hours behind. So middle of the night, I hope they get a nap in. Donald Trump holding transition meetings on the basis I've been told certain things. I can't reveal everything I know, but he does, I believe, have at least one key meeting on personnel today at Mar-a-Lago before he flies to Brownsville, Texas, or at least he's scheduled to, where he plans to, as of now, view the 5 p.m. Eastern Time window launch opening of a test rocket of Elon Musk. Very exciting, occurring exactly when we'll be live. So who knows what'll happen. But tonight, there'll be the simultaneous rocket launch and then the metaphorical rocket launch of Dan and Sean meeting and appearing live on stage together for the first time. Capitol Hill, a bunch of stuff going on, including 10 a.m. Eastern Time, Speaker Johnson and his leadership team holding a news conference. All right, guys, you want to say anything about the Russia-Ukraine situation to start with? Some on the right are saying Joe Biden did this to start conflict and make it harder for Donald Trump to bring about peace, to keep the Ukrainians on the offensive. Others say, it's not motivated to hurt Donald Trump. But Sean, thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm actually concerned that Putin believes that there's a window between now and Trump's inauguration to to become more aggressive, to do things that he doesn't think Biden will have the will to fight back on. And he wants to get whatever he wants to get done between now and January 20th. So this signing of this this proclamation regarding their use of arms is should be very, very concerning.
Yeah.
And so my concern is actually that Putin wants to claim that this is the window that he can do something before he actually has to face Trump, and says to Trump, "Hey, you're not president yet. Let me get away, stay out of this while I, square off with Biden."
What would that include, though, Sean?
I don't know. That's why I'm saying I'm concerned. I think you've got
Yeah.
Biden down in Brazil, the vice president hanging out in Hawaii. I mean, I believe that Putin wants to send a message, and he believes that he can send it before Donald Trump comes in, so he can say to him with a clear conscience, "Hey, this wasn't about you. This was about Biden." And
Leaving the pot.
Biden armed the
Yeah.
Ukrainians with these U.S. missiles. They fired them into us. We look at that as an act of aggression. We have a right to seek retribution, but it's not about you.
Yeah. Leaving the politics out of it. I read today, I don't know if this is true. It seems true. Joe Biden has not talked to the media, and talking to the media means talking to the public since the election. Is that true? Anybody think that's crazy? Dan, what do you think?
Well, actually, to pick up on what you just said, whether he has or hasn't, spoken in some capacity, I'm curious why he greenlighted this now, because it's been in the news since I think late spring that Ukraine has asked for permission to fire long-range missiles into Russia. They obviously seized a small amount of territory in Russia over the summer. And so why, Biden hasn't come out and said kind of what facts have changed or what logic, he's now using to do this. And I'm curious whether or not, Trump says anything publicly. Don Jr. has, I think Elon Musk has, not on this specific thing, but just kind of on Ukraine. Do we have an instance in which the U.S. policy under Joe Biden as sitting president is one thing and the incoming administration outright says another? That would be awkward.
Oh, look,
Yeah.
I think one of the other things you got to keep in mind is that this administration for the last 4 years has failed to give us any sense of what winning looks like. They failed to give the Ukrainians the tools they need to win. They send them more money, but then they don't give them what they're asking for to actually win. And now all of a sudden we're giving them long-range missiles that they can attack into Russia, which is something that Russia has said would be seen as an act of war. We do this at this time. I mean, the timing of this from this administration, after holding back everything for the last several years, is a little odd.
Yeah.
Well,
I hope
they haven't held back everything. I mean, in fairness, they have said the goal is to not let Russia take over Ukraine. Now, the question is it possible, given the advances Russia made early on in the campaign and the stalemate that we've been looking at for a year? But we also have to, Sean, then say Trump has not said, like, is he standing by Ukraine? Or, he said, I'm going to end it on day one, has not detailed exactly how that works. But it's a mess. I mean, it's just the whole situation.
I
But we
don't like.
haven't given them the weapon systems that they've asked for. And I mean, at first it
We
was
haven't given all the weapon systems. We have given them quite a few weapon systems.
Yeah, but after, I mean, we've been dragging our heels on properly doing this and then wondering why they're not winning.
Yeah. I'll say two things and then we'll move on. First, I never like to assume the worst of motives, but doing anything during the transition, if you're the incumbent administration, without significant consultation with the incoming administration, I think it's just a bad practice, no matter who's in the White House. So I hope they've explained it to the Trump folks. Number two, it's been the case from the beginning that the Biden team has tried to balance helping the Ukrainians very aggressively without crossing any tripwire that would lead to World War III. And I applaud their balancing of the equities. But you have to say, regardless of what Donald Trump does, the proof is in the pudding. The war continues. Ukraine is not in a great place. Lots of people have died. So you can say it was an impossible situation to manage, but it happened on their watch, and they're handing off to Joe Biden, to Donald Trump, a horrible situation. So you just can't say that the balance was definitely the right thing, because of where we are.
I want
It
to
gave
tie
them
two
either-
things.
Yes,
Two
sir.
things you said, Mark, together. One is that Biden hasn't talked to the press, and two is whether or not he has briefed Trump. I mean, they'll go hand in hand because one is briefing Trump, two is letting us know that he's briefed Trump, right? And then the question becomes who on Team Trump? I mean, you've got a chief of staff, an incoming chief of staff in Susie Wiles, but no real national security. I mean, I guess Mike Walls.
Well, you've got Walls is pretty active and talking to folks, so they could be briefing Walls. I think.
Right.
I think that.
But
would
I think
be,
it's incumbent
I think
upon
that'd be
your
proper.
point.
That'd be proper.
I think they owe it to us to say we are in contact with these people to make sure that they are in the loop on this.
I agree.
It
I
adds some
agree.
reassurance to us because this is not, you have Putin talking about firing missiles and using nuclear nukes. We have a right to know that the current administration is actually on top of this.
Yeah. And let's be honest. I raised the Joe Biden not talking to the press for several reasons. One is accountability, but the other is tens of millions of Americans don't think the guy's running the White House. He's running it more than those skeptics think, but he's got severe acuity decline, which has been going on now for nearly a decade. And the vice president's in Hawaii. Sure, she can help out from there, but it's a scary thing. All right. Speaking of scary things, yesterday you two went out on quite a limb, being very confident that Matt Gaetz would be confirmed. Let's look at two pieces of data from the last 24 hours, and then I want to see if you guys are equally confident.
Can we start with Treasury? Can we start with Treasury?
No. We're starting with Matt Gaetz. All right. First of all, cheerleader in chief Elon Musk took to Twitter. I don't know if you'd call it late last night or early this morning. Let's check the time code on these tweets. What does it say? Does it say? I got to say, could be the truest thing Elon Musk has ever X'd. He's the Judge Dredd America needs to clean up a corrupt system and put powerful bad actors in prison. Gaetz will be our hammer of justice. All right, I'll express my ignorance. What is hammer of justice? Is that something that's a thing? I don't know. Or maybe just Trump-like capitalization. As for these accusations against him, I consider them worth less than nothing. Under our laws, a man is considered innocent until proven guilty, as is a woman. If Attorney General Garland, an unprincipled douchebag, this is our top advisor to the president-elect, could have secured a conviction against Gaetz, he would have, but he knew he could not. Case closed. That suggests all systems go. In Mar-a-Lago, it's Gaetz or bust. And then the New York Times reporting team of Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan, at least one of whom has regular over the past few days, President-elect Donald J. Trump has admitted that his besieged choice for Attorney General, Matt Gaetz, has less than even odds of being confirmed by the Senate. Sean, you first. Does the Musk-Haberman-Swan combo lead you to be more, less, or equally optimistic about Matt Gaetz's prospects of confirmation? I like to sometimes ask the questions like it's a real show.
I actually think that hammer of justice appears to be some kind of character.
What is it?
John Podhoretz is saying in the chat that hammer of justice is a Thor reference.
Right. It's something about a game. Anyway.
Okay.
I think everything can be true at the same time. I think Trump still wants him, but he's not ignorant of the fact that there are, he watches enough Fox News and other television that he sees the concerns out there. That being said, Elon wouldn't be doubling down on him just a few hours ago if they had anything but continued support for him. So I think two things can be true at once. I think he recognizes where things are. There's if this report comes out, depending on what's in it, that lawyer went around and made the rounds on the media last night. So I think he's still standing behind him. There's no cracks in that armor to continue the references. But I do think that there is concern whether or not Trump is, I think, cognizant of the fact that enough senators may not be on board.
So, Sean, yes or no? Have you ratcheted down?
I still think yes. No. He's still a yes in my book.
Okay. Dan.
Well, as the facts change, I reserve the right to change my opinion. I think that Trump is making calls I mean, clearly Republican senators don't want to have to cast this vote. They don't want to have to confirm him.
Correct.
I think the issue is just, I still believe they will not publicly go against Trump. So as long as there isn't some piece of news that is so damning, and that report very well may contain it, and Trump says that's it, we're moving on, then I think they'll all breathe a sigh of relief and they go on. But I think as long as there's a staring competition, I stand by. I do not see Joni Ernst digging in and just saying to Trump, nope, I'm not doing it. And, you know, next nominee.
One of the points that supporters have brought up of Gaetz is that, hey, DOJ investigated this. There might be icky behavior, but there's not criminal behavior, and that's a very different standard. If we start judging people by icky, you know, we're going to go down a very slippery slope. And they're very they're very eager to point out the fact that DOJ, the Biden DOJ under Merrick Garland, investigated this and found nothing worth prosecuting.
Right. So I agree with almost everything you guys said. The Republican senators would like it to go away. They're pushing back on Trump and Vance and others and saying, this isn't a good idea. It's going to be, you won't be able to recruit as U.S. attorneys. Hearing will be hard. If Trump doesn't want to withdraw it and Gaetz doesn't want to withdraw it, there's nothing the Senate can do. Now, the chair can refuse to have a hearing, but that's not going to happen. So then, excuse me. The question is, can they get to a hearing? And how does Gaetz do at the hearing? Do these witnesses come? I still think he's more likely than not to be confirmed. I disagree with President Trump about his own nominee. But I still also think it's possible that even for Matt Gaetz, it may be a bridge too far, depending on what comes out. All right. The other four of the controversial five, before we get to Treasury.
One quick tweet. I think President Trump obviously was very impressed with the way that Brett Kavanaugh fought for himself. Came out there and
100%.
We have yet to see that from Matt. Now, that's obviously probably a very concerted effort that he realizes that initially the fight is keeping Republican senators in lock. But I would not be surprised at some point to see, and I'll bet $1 million it's on Hannity, but he comes out and says, I'm going to address these concerns.
Right.
I think if strategically, right, they're kind of like, let's see what you guys got. Show us your hand. You saw the lawyer come out last night, make the rounds. So they're trying to like get these guys to come out and show us what they got. And then they're going to respond.
Yeah. You know, there's alleged payments for sex. There's alleged sex with an underage girl. And there's alleged drug use. And if the evidence is simply the word of others, I don't think Matt Gaetz will back down. He wants to get to a hearing, I think, and I think he might. But the allegations in that cluster are getting the bulk of the attention. I know for a fact that there are other concerns, some personal, right? Senators, he's insulted almost every senator. Watch Mitch McConnell on all these things. If Mitch McConnell wants Gaetz to go down, I think he can get 3 other senators to go with him. And as of now, I think that's what he wants. And I don't think Donald Trump can lobby Mitch McConnell to change his mind. That's a little preview of where I think this is headed. All right, put up the picture, please. The controversial 5. Gaetz has dominated since the 3 of us convened, and all of us convened. Gaetz has dominated. Not very much news on the other 4, although there are a few additional. Tulsi Gabbard is a tool of the Russians pieces out in the press. Either of you want to say anything about any of the other 4 and what you think they stand?
So can I just make one point? Tulsi is an officer. I think she rose to an 05. She was a lieutenant colonel. By definition, she had to have a minimum of a secret clearance during her career. My guess is that throughout her career, at some point, she rose to depending on her billet, got a TS clearance. If there were significant concerns, at some point that would have gotten flagged. She wouldn't have been able to, you can't stay in the officer corps without a secret clearance. And there's no way. I'm not saying that they can't come out and further vetting, but I'm just saying for all of these conversations, just stop for a moment and realize that she was a member of Congress, but she was also a member of the military, served honorably, and had a security clearance issued by the United States government that was probably reinvestigated, depending on whether there's TS or S, a minimum of every 10 and probably likely every 5.
Correct. All true. I think she'll be confirmed. All right. Treasury.
Well, can I just add though,
Yes,
one
go
other
ahead.
thing though on one of them is just, I think the fact that Cory Booker came out and kind of talked about the food RFK's focus on food, that there was no Democratic blowback. Like when Jared made his statement last week on vaccines, and then the next day kind of walked part of that back because there was blowback. It's interesting, right? Cory Booker is a sitting senator. He just thinks running for president. Like, it's not insignificant, and he got no criticism for doing that. And so that, to me, that's interesting.
In part, I agree. Part because he focused on issues. Cory Booker, big believer in the presumption of grace. So he's happy to talk about Bobby Kennedy's policy positions and not hate on the guy. All right. Treasury Secretary, huge, wide open, more wide open maybe than even yesterday. They got to find jobs for Lutnick and McMahon, the two transition co-chairs. I'll give you a new possibility. Lutnick, Commerce, McMahon, Education.
How about this? Lutnick, ambassador to the Court of St. James.
Maybe. Bessent, and NEC, Treasury, TBD, but a big name. I'm not predicting that. I'm not reporting that's what's happening, but I'm just putting those chess pieces on the board. Sean, if you were advising someone who was up for both Treasury and NEC, which is the better job?
Depends on your ego.
In this administration, which is the better job?
Depends on your ego. I think that NEC is more powerful, has more sway, more connection. I mean, it's sort of like the NSC to the DOD, right? You're actually calling the shots, but it's pretty cool to have your own plane and to fly around and be the Secretary of Defense. And so if you want your name on money and all of the trappings that go with the Secretary of the Treasury and the historic, lineage that accompanies
great office.
Oh, huge office. And so if that's who you are, but if you want a power base and you actually want to affect change, then NEC is more powerful. But
correct.
I think
100% correct. And that's why all this focus on Treasury is silly. NEC is the person in the Oval Office nonstop with the president. Secretary of Treasury is the guy or gal stuck in Jakarta at some international finance minister meeting.
Yeah, but I think that when you look at the people who've had these jobs, right? So like Stephen last Trump, I mean, like he was perfectly suited for that. Like he was obviously really smart when it came to finance, but like they're very accomplished people. Having a job where you fly around the world representing the United States is pretty cool.
It's a great job, but if you want to affect the policy of the administration the first 200 days, you're better off being an NEC.
Right, but it's a difference between being a staffer and being a cabinet member, and that's
I can't cut my line.
I'm telling you, there's an ego aspect of this.
There is, but all I'm saying is, if somebody asked me, I would say, do you want a plane and a nice office and to fly around and meet with the foreign minister of Jakarta, or do you want to be influencing what the government actually does and spending time with the president, influencing him on decisions? Treasury is like 200 yards away. It might as well be a million miles. Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I was just about to say it's kind of like a king versus prime minister. And if you really do want to impact change and be involved in the granular nature of decision making, look, the other thing is, given that Trump's White House usually has some very sharp elbows, like, do you want to be in the room with the knife, in your hand and coming in your back? Or do you want to show up in the Hamptons and say you're the Treasury Secretary and you were just in, London or Paris, and when you get out of office, if your goal is to, this is crass, monetize your experience, you'd way rather be the Treasury Secretary with all the global relationships than the person who knows the inner workings of the tax deal.
Well, and this is why I said it goes back to ego. I remember when I was the communications director for the conference under Bush, and we get a call that says, hey, the NEC can come over and brief members or the staffers, and we'd be like, okay, so who is that? And they'd say, or the Treasury Secretary, and everyone would be like, great, we'll sit. I mean, there is a flashy piece of this that's a lot more appealing. Again, same thing with NSA versus DOD. Like the SecDef may not have the influence inside the building that NSA does, but you have a much nicer little entourage and fly around the world in 2 planes.
Oh, it's fantastic. And enjoy Jakarta. Sean, who do you think Treasury Secretary and head of NSC are going to be at this point, or do you not know?
I mean, I think that the narrative is that Lutnick is sort of trying to find a role. I will say the dark horse in my mind is still Lighthizer. He was very loyal to Trump. He executed the tariff policy and the trade policy very, very well. Everybody likes Robert, and he's also well liked in the community. I mean, he's built a career. Everyone may not agree with him, but he's a very smart guy, very well liked guy, and he's able to affect change without kind of doing it in an abrasive way. So he's a dark horse. I still think the front runner for Commerce is Linda McMahon. I mean, I know you're shaking your head there.
No, my subtle head shakes.
I know.
Howard to Commerce. Howard to
Okay.
Commerce. Write it down. All right. Last one, and then we're going to get to your questions. Lots of hands up. Thank you. Please stay with us. We'll get to you in a moment. Two white men. They happen to be white men. I'm pointing it out because the DNC is looking to the future. Are in the ring for DNC chair. Former mayor of Baltimore, former governor of Maryland, current head of Social Security, former presidential candidate, guitarist Martin O'Malley is one. And the other is the current and longtime chair of the super successful Minnesota Democratic Party, although it's called like the Labor Farm Party or something.
DFL. Yeah.
DFL. Ken Martin. Both very nice guys. What do you think, Dan, of this field so far? Are they world beaters? Martin claims he's entering with 87 commitments out of the like 500 votes. It's pretty good. Go ahead.
I mean, I think this goes to what we've talked about, which is Martin's been a member of the DNC for 13 years. He's held all sorts of ceremonial titles, vice chair. He's an insider's insider in a state that is, it's trending purple, but it is still, kind of leans blue. I wouldn't say that Governor Walz wowed people during his time as vice president, and the fact that he had all these problems in his resume. If you want change and you want someone who's very nimble and has a track record of kind of shaking it up and performing well in a competitive area, I'm not sure you would look at the former governor of the state of Maryland, which is solidly blue, and somebody from Minnesota who's been on the DNC cocktail circuit for almost 15 years.
Son.
I would tell you as a Republican, I don't know Ken Martin at all, but I would say that Martin O'Malley probably could raise more money and be a better face. He gets the circuit better. But this goes back to this conversation we had before, which is where Ken Martin has the advantages, these clubby natures. I mean, Dan was right. Whatever it's 12 or 15 years he's been on the DNC, that means more than, I mean, this is student council on steroids. This is literally him being able to call these 5 people that he served on the credentials committee with in the 2008 cycle and say, hey, buddies. So I give the inside track to anybody that's been inside the committee.
Yep. Although, as you pointed out yesterday, the RNC is much more inclined to always give it to a member or former member than the Democrats. I will say, I think they're both going to be contenders in this thing. I think they both will get votes. We welcome them both on the future to talk about their platform. I do think it's also possible, what this makes me think of is the Democrats could go with the model they've sometimes gone with in the past. Somebody like Martin O'Malley, who can raise money, who's experienced on television as the national chair, and then the inside guy to run the committee, do the nuts and bolts as the, whatever they call it, the chair or whatever. So not the chair, co-chair thing, which makes me crazy that the RNC does it, because there's no such thing as chair and co-chair. There's vice chair or 2 co-chairs, but for some reason the RNC calls the vice chair the co-chair. Makes me insane. In any event, 2 guys already in. There will be more, but I think these 2 guys are going to be pressuring others to get in soon because they're both super aggressive about seeking commitments.
Mark, can I just add one thing that I'm kind of curious to see? Kamala Harris has been very silent. Tim Walz has been relatively silent. If you're thinking about 2028, you have an interest in who gets this because they're thinking about redoing the calendar again for 2028.
Yeah.
When do people start trying to, put out feelers to get their preferred candidate in front. And if you see somebody else making a move, do you try to cut him or her off?
Yeah, but I asked Martin O'Malley, the New York Times did, about Iowa, New Hampshire, et cetera, and he dodged the thing. It's going to be one of the many issues that these
But
candidates have to address.
But Dan, I'd go. I mean, if you role play this for a second, you go, "Hi, this is Tim Waltz. I wanted to just touch base with regard to your potential race for chairman." I'd be like, "Hey, I gotta go." Like, I don't know if I really care what Tim Waltz. I mean, I get your
Yeah.
point. I think it's valid, but I also don't know that. Like, it's sort of like one of those too soon moments that you
Yeah.
really want to be calling right now, saying, "Hey, I'm concerned about your race." I'd be like, "You should have worried about your race, not mine."
Yeah.
Never
All right,
too
everyone,
soon.
bring folks in. Celia, you're first. Tell folks who don't know where you are, who you supported for president, if you wish, and what's on your mind.
Hi, I am in Tennessee. I was a first-time Trump voter, 2016, 2020. I avoided the top of the ticket. I would say reluctant, not exactly support, but I come from the libertarian side of things, so I worry about like some tariff policy and stuff like that. But I digress. So I guess my question, a little off topic, but it has been a major issue down here. In the fourth quarter of 2021 was our peak. I live in Knoxville specifically. Was our peak for our occupancy rate, which hit 98.6%. It has gone down to still north of 96%. So it's not great as someone who is in their late 20s looking to purchase a house, and pricing is just not going down. So I was just kind of wondering, obviously I understand where Trump's priorities are right now in terms of picking cabinet positions, but do you guys have any idea who would be leading HUD, or kind of where his line of thinking is for some more domestic oriented policy that is not security related, if that makes sense, or
Yeah.
kind of like where that's going to fall?
I'll start. One policy they're talking about is taking federal owned land, and the federal government owns a ton of land, and making it available for housing development. And I think governors need to play a big role here, but I do think you'll see tax breaks also along these lines. I do think that the economic team understands that to get inflation down and to have concrete accomplishments, lowering the price of housing by increasing supply, I think will be part of their initial domestic policy push. Sean.
Agreed. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I've heard a couple names floated, but it hasn't been it has not been the same degree of contention that some of the other cabinet slots have. And some of the usual names are apparently not interested. So I'll be interested to see where that ends up.
Yep.
Well,
Dan.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go
Sorry.
ahead.
Yeah.
No, you go, Sarah. Go ahead.
Well, I guess my only follow-up question with that was I tend to fall on a side where I really do enjoy seeing the, for lack of better description, crumbling of a lot of these departments. I would like to see, I'm a fan of getting rid of DOE. I can see where the federal government would need to play some role in education, but post 1979, I haven't really seen much evidence that they have done so. So, along those lines, do you think that a department like HUD could be taken down a few notches in the same way that other departments have been, to redirect some more of that regulation back to state and localities where it tends to just have bigger impact anyway?
I think that some of the programs at HUD will be scrutinized by Elon Musk and Ramaswamy. And I wouldn't be surprised to see some of those programs eliminated, but not things that connect to the encouragement of building more housing. But I think that department is ripe for that. Not that then Congress won't necessarily go along, but I think they will target it. Dan.
That's what I was going to say. The challenge with every single federal program in every department is there tends to be bipartisan congressional defense because someone's district is a winner and money flows in, or it is a family relative that, works there. And so, the classic example is when they go to close defense bases or get rid of defense contracts, and you literally will have the armed services saying, we don't want that ship or that plane, or like and Congress like, nope, we'd rather pay 4x to service the 25-year-old airplane than to make a cheaper, more efficient new plane. That's where this stuff gets ground down. So it's not pretty, but any possible way to make government more efficient, I think most people are supportive of, but we'll see.
I would just say, Celia, the one thing that there is a huge push to decentralize a lot of what's happening in Washington. I think you're going to hear a lot of talk about moving departments out of Washington, D.C. I wouldn't be surprised if you see the Department of Energy end up in Pennsylvania. I don't know about HUD specifically, but I know that there are places where there's already been discussion, and there was during the first Trump, and what they have been spent, the untold story of right now, in my opinion, is what's happened the last 4 years. There have been a lot of plans put together that they are staring at right now, saying, if you want to do this, we've done all the legwork to get all this ready to go. So I wouldn't be surprised to see real early in January, in terms of not calendar wise, but like in the, 21, 22, 23, discussions about making some quick actions, decentralizing power, moving things out of Washington, D.C., reducing the size of them, etc.
But you know what the challenge is? They do that, it's slowed down, and I want to see Governor Youngkin being quiet when they talk about moving, people and jobs out of the state of Virginia. I mean, this is where the delegations lock in together and say, we just have to get through 4 years. If we grind it down, slow it up, delay it, the next president will try to work, to change this. And this is our system.
Yeah, which honestly, I love it. I love the slow grind of government.
You think about this, Dan, real interesting. Maryland, obviously, the Trump administration is not going to be concerned with what Wes Moore thinks. In Virginia, Glenn Youngkin's term limited, right? So it's what does that portend for his future? And maybe the deal is, hey, we move a bunch of jobs out of Northern Virginia that would connect to DC, and we move them to Hampton Roads or something. Win-win. So we get more jobs where we want them in Virginia, less in Northern Virginia where we don't want them. I actually can see this thing working out just perfectly.
You're painting a beautiful picture, Sean. I love it.
Thank you, Celia. I appreciate that.
Celia, thank you for joining. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right. Lauren, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, who you supported, what's on your mind, please.
Hi, yeah. So I voted Trump for the first time. I'm in DC. I actually spoke on this, I think the day of the election, and I was
yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So I actually got outed at school. I go to law school here in DC. In one of my classes, I guess someone had like clipped part of what I said and put it on Twitter, and then so I got outed in one of my classes that I voted for.
Lauren, how did the outing work? Like, was it for the whole class, or just like one person said something?
Well, so I walked in and a girl was talking about how, the reason why Trump won is because there are a lot of uneducated voters in this country. And, I just can't stand stuff like that. So I was like, even if voters are uneducated, a lot of them know that their pocketbooks were better, 6 years ago. And so that's why that's why they voted. But then whenever I'm in law school, I feel the need to be like, oh, but I didn't vote for him. So I did lie, which wasn't good. But again, in DC, it just feels necessary to do that. But oh well. But anyways, my question is related to foreign policy. So one of the big reasons why I did vote for Trump this time was because of foreign policy, specifically in the Middle East. I'm worried that he's going to be an isolationist, but I think that like when MAGA talks about him being an isolationist, I feel like because he talks about, I don't want to get into forever wars. I don't want to, be intervening in other countries' affairs where it's not necessary. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be an isolationist. Like in his first term, he put heavy sanctions on Iran. I mean, he did such a good job with Iran, and, did like smaller targeted military actions with the whole point being deterrence, like no wars by deterrence through strength. So I guess I've been pleased to see who Trump has nominated for the foreign policy roles in general, because it does seem like there'll be a continuation of his first term's foreign policy approach. But I guess I just wanted to kind of see with Sean, do you think that that's, maybe a fair assessment, or do you think that he's going to be more isolationist than he was for the first term?
So first of all, I'm sorry about what's going on at school. So you got a new clip probably today.
Oh,
I like the way that you frame this. Too often it's a very black and white situation, right? And so we were talking about Ukraine, for example. And the issue that I have as a taxpayer, as an American, is well, let's just send them a check or we don't support them, right? The Biden administration has yet to give us a plan that says this is how we win this. This is how we equip them to get them to a position of strength. And I get what Dan's comments were earlier, but time and time again, whether it was planes or the training to use the planes, et cetera, we didn't give them stuff that they could effectively use. And we said, well, then you can't do this with that, et cetera. You can't say that you want them to win the war and then tie their hands. And so part of what I think President Trump needs to do is get in there and say, hey, if we're going to have them win this war, this is what we need to do, but we're not just going to keep sending money hand over fist to anybody. With NATO, the idea that we have NATO, to me, I was at that summit during the first term where we ratified and celebrated Article 5. But the bottom line with NATO is it's a two-way street. We agreed as part of NATO that we would defend another NATO country when it was attacked, but they agreed to spend 2% of their defense equipping themselves. And they were shirking their own responsibilities. And we can't keep having, and the same thing with trade. I'm a huge believer in trade. But for too long, the American people were the guys on the end of this that said, we'll let them trade with us, but we won't get market access to them. And so I think that too often we paint Trump with this brush. He doesn't want this, when in fact, I think a lot of times it's about fairness.
Can I say, though, Netanyahu has ignored U.S. presidents for 30 years, and I would not put hope that he is going to suddenly listen to Donald Trump. I mean, he just does what he wants to do. He and Trump ended the first Trump term in a horrible place. And I also think there is an outstanding question about Donald Trump's stomach for war. The idea of thousands of Americans dying on his watch, I'm not sure he can handle. And, it's one thing to talk tough on Twitter. It's another thing if push comes to shove. Would he really want to put the U.S. military on the line? And we'll just hopefully we never find out.
And I agree, Dan, that's a good thing that, he is not, he does not want war. I remember when we dealing with the issue with Assad, the images of women and young children being killed and gassed was abhorrent to him. He was so taken back by that he is not by any, this is a guy who wants peace, who wants stability. And so he'll fight for that.
It may be the Trump critics' biggest mistake of describing him when they call him a warmonger. He's just
he's not.
the opposite of it. Lauren, thanks for joining again. Appreciate having you here. All right, Nick, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, who you supported for president, what's on your mind, please.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, everybody. First,
Morning.
long-time listener, first-time caller.
Good. Thank you for raising your hand.
So I'm in Minnesota. I served 8 years in the Minnesota House of Representatives and overlapped with the time that Tim Walz was in Congress, a very conservative Democrat in Congress, and then elected statewide and governed as a very liberal governor in Minnesota, including my last term in office. I negotiated a final budget deal as a co-chair of the Health Committee with Governor Walz. Early on in his time as governor, we did a bipartisan criminal justice reform bill that went very well. We worked very well together. 2 years later, as he was eyeing up the trifecta and total control of government and national aspirations, he became, quite frankly, impossible to work with in Minnesota. But what got my attention is the brief discussion you had about Ken Martin, and I will tell to Dan and to Sean, underestimate Ken Martin at your own peril. This individual has built an absolute
Nick,
machine.
I want you, Nick, I want you to keep going, but I'll let everybody know because I don't think you said it. Nick, you're a Republican.
I am, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah, okay. It was
Yep.
implicitly clear, but keep going. Tell us why he's so impressive.
So he's an absolute machine. What he built with the Democratic Farmer Labor Party in Minnesota. And now, to be clear, since Trump came into office in 2016, there is no, I think there are 2 rural seats in the state legislature that are Democrats still. Republicans have taken over the entire greater area of Minnesota, but he has built a firewall around Minneapolis and St. Paul in the suburbs that is basically impenetrable. And we see that now in the congressional races where there are no competitive congressional races in Minnesota anymore. And when you look at this last election cycle where you had Republicans winning from East Coast to West Coast, you had a Minnesota DFL party that raised, I think, 5 times more cash on hand than the Republicans did in the state in Minnesota. And with outside groups spent nearly 10 times the amount of money on the races. And they kept the majority in the Senate. And although they lost a few houses, a few seats in the House, it will likely end at a 67 seat tie in the Minnesota House of Representatives, with Governor Walz returning as governor. In the 14 years that Ken Martin has been in leadership in Minnesota, he's taken over the state party and he rules it with an iron fist, and he raises money and he wins. And I think you saw Tim Walz come out of near obscurity because of 2-year cycle of full DFL control, where they put the car in drive, jammed a cane down on the accelerator, and hopped out and just went as far left as they could. But Ken Martin was able to use that to propel Tim Walz into kind of national prominence, to the point where he was selected out of obscurity to be the vice presidential candidate, because he'd go on MSNBC and say Trump was weird. These guys know what they're doing, and they're very, very good at it. I pray that Republicans think that he shouldn't get the job, because if Ken Martin gets the job, Republicans are in trouble coast to coast.
Dan and Sean, questions for Nick.
I mean, okay, that's obviously a very interesting perspective, and incredibly valuable to hear. I think the one thing that's interesting is he, built the firewall around the kind of urban core and those near in suburban, kind of ring collar rings. To what extent the losses in the rest of the state are kind of the macro wins of Trump's gains, and the state party chair isn't going to stop a hurricane that's happening nationally, versus it's just a more comfortable place for him to be and to communicate with, because obviously the party's problems, not just that they're bleeding out the core in the urban centers, they're losing the suburban, but obviously we've got to try to make inroads again back in the rural and exurban areas. So I guess my question is, did he focus on those other areas, or did he just batten the hatches down amongst Trump's rise?
Hold on. Oh, you got muted accidentally. Go ahead, Nick. You could be unmuted again. Go ahead.
Sorry about that, guys. No, I think it was a huge shift that, Minnesota is unique in our northern part of the state. It's kind of that iron range, iron mining piece, the hugest component of labor for the DFL labor piece. When metro environmentalists try to stop rural mining, that was a conflict within the DFL party that basically made those votes ungettable for Democrats. And so there was kind of this natural realignment. I think it was sped up by about a decade by Donald Trump being elected in 2016, or at first we thought people highly vote for Donald Trump in 2016, but a lot of the legislative seats still hang on. But then by 2018 and 2020, those legislative seats were gone. The congressional seat flipped. Rick Nolan was out. That kind of old James Oberstar, Rick Nolan, 8th congressional district. That thing was gone. Tim Walz's old congressional seat in the farming area in rural Minnesota, that thing's gone for Democrats. That's never going back. But if you look at kind of the western suburbs around Lake Minnetonka, kind of Prince's backyard, that was always a Republican stronghold. That is absolutely gone now. One of my former legislative colleagues, she's a OBGYN, pro-abortion. She won with almost 60% of the vote. And Republicans couldn't muster a candidate that could really put up a fight there. So it's been a structural realignment of the state. But what he's been able to do is the organization that they have, the fundraising that they have, how he's able to keep from their Senate Majority Leader to who was the Democrat nominee for governor until Tim Walz beat her in a primary. Ken Martin gets those two to work together to pass the liberal agenda, 6 months later. And so what he's able to do to organize folks and hold people's feet to the fire and push forward is incredible. The organization of that party is incredible. And if he's able to, in some fashion, replicate that on a national stage, Democrats, I think, could miss an opportunity by dismissing him as a mid-America, you turned a blue state purple. But the fact that he's held a blue state pretty much blue and built up an incredible operation in the process, I wouldn't pick a fight against Ken Martin. I know that.
John.
Just real quick. So if he were elected chair of the DNC, is he the kind of guy that, you mentioned his stranglehold on Minnesota Dems, but is he a big fundraiser? Is he the kind of guy, considering some of the issues we talked about in this platform post-election, is he someone who's going to look hard at the structural issues of messaging, et cetera, or is he just going to, I guess there's a big difference between running a state and the national party.
Yeah, no. And look, I'm a crime lab analyst turned legislator turned lobbyist. So take from me what you will. 10 years ago, I was working at crime scenes and looking at fingerprints. Now I go down to the Capitol every winter and lobby. So, I'm no expert. But
it's a different set of dead bodies you're looking for.
Fair enough. Same set of criminals, different set of dead bodies. But I think the difference here in what we've seen in Minnesota to a national stage, obviously it's more controlled. It's influencing neighbors and similar messaging. But what he was able to pick up on in 2 years when we were all had our surfboards and we're waiting for the red wave that never came to Minnesota. We saw Democrats in Minnesota double down on messaging. All the polling that I saw and we saw talked about jobs, economy, inflation. They doubled down on pro-choice issues and the Dobbs decision and just absolutely crushed Republicans in this state as a result and got their trifecta and ran with it. He's incredible on messaging. Every single Democrat candidate in the state ran off the same playbook. It was highly organized. highly fine-tuned. I get that that works in a state, and how does that translate into a 50-state push? But I don't know. Part of
Okay,
me says,
Nick.
I hope you guys take him, because
Yeah.
we'd be better off in Minnesota if he went somewhere else.
Yeah. Nick, thank you. Thank you for joining, and thank you for sharing that great insight into somebody who everybody's going to get to know better as he goes forward. Thank you. Sean needs to go because
Hey.
Requires Roddy McDowell level makeup to appear in public. So he's
And I have
got
to go. I have to go. I'm going to buy an outfit for tonight, a special outfit. I will say,
Yeah.
Mark, in the time that we've been on, I've got a lot of updates that it does appear that the rumor mill is Linda ends up at Commerce, as you suggested.
No, not commerce, and education.
Education. I'm sorry. You're right. Education. Yes. And apparently it's starting to make its way out. So
Where did you hear it first, Sean?
on the morning meeting.
Yeah, but more specifically from me. I'll say again,
I thought we were a
McMahon.
team.
Oh, it's all for one for all. McMahon Education, Howard Commerce, Besant NEC, Celebrity Choice Treasury.
Well, just remember yesterday,
write
Dan
it
and I said that Howard didn't get Treasury. We were right on that one.
Yeah, you also said Matt Gaetz would be the next Attorney General of the United States. We'll see how that ends up. Thank you for all the questions. As always, you Democrats, I see you here. You're not invisible to me. You're just not raising your hands for me to call on you. So please participate on equal measure. We want to hear from you. We'd love to hear from you about Martin O'Malley and Martin, the other Martin.
And
Ken
how you
Martin,
feel about
the
these
two
nominees?
Martins.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for joining. Sean had to go. Dan has to go. Does not require the same level of makeup, but always gets a pedicure before a public appearance. So he needs to go do that. Those of you in the tri-state area, I'll tell you one last time. Tonight's the night. Live event in Greenwich Village, in the West Village, most specifically 130 West 3rd Street at the Village Underground. 4 o'clock VIP reception, 5 o'clock show. Please join us if you can. And remember, this is the show for tonight. It'll stream live on YouTube. It will not be here on Zoom on the two-way platform. There is no 6 p.m. show tonight. I know I'm going to get a lot of emails just as we're coming off stage from people saying, where's the 6 o'clock show? There is no 6 o'clock show tonight. One night only, 5 p.m. tonight. Please join us in person if you can. If not, on YouTube only. Don't text me and ask me for the Zoom link. Don't do it. I'll be busy. Have a great day. We'll see many of you at 5 p.m. Eastern time tonight, some in person and some on YouTube. Have a great day.